Hello and welcome to the Don't Shop on Tuesday Zoom chat. We're your hosts, Jacob and Barrie, and today we're joined by Ren Brabenec. He's a Nashville-based freelance writer and journalist who reports on politics, local issues, environmental stories, foreign policy, and the economy. Thank you so much for joining us, Ren.
Thanks for having me, you guys.
So, one of the reasons that we wanted to bring you on is because you've written about something that's actually really near and dear to our own hearts in Baltimore, which is that um, the issue of these sort of AI data and learning centers, and that there's some reporting that you've done on these happening in Memphis, or in Tennessee. We have at Johns Hopkins is attempting to build a giant learning center right here with a large amount of environmental damage itself. So we're in the middle of trying to at least mitigate that damage. It seems difficult to entirely stop the train on these.
Yeah, and it really depends on the community. I mean, these things are popping up all across the country. I was, as I was actually preparing for this discussion, I was listening to Democracy Now! In the background, and they just had a headline come out a couple days ago about a community in St. Charles, Missouri that was successfully able to prevent a data center from going in. So I'm happy to get into the weeds about what's going on in Memphis, but I just want to start by saying these data centers, this isn't unique to Memphis or to your guys' community in Baltimore. These things are popping up all across the country. My hometown up in northern Michigan is dealing with a potential one right now. So they're popping up everywhere. Some communities are having success preventing them from coming in, and other ones like Memphis are not. So it really depends on the place.
Did you hear in that before we get to what's going on in Memphis, did you hear what their strategy was around what the mechanism around success was? Because it's be wonderful to replicate.
Yeah, I went back and I re-listened to it, and it's still like a developing news story, but apparently it's not a huge community. Just St. Charles, Missouri is kind of a, I don't think it's very big, and essentially it was just the democratic process. It was the people, the constituents, and the taxpayers and the residents of that community were able to put so much pressure on city and local officials and leadership that we don't want this burden in our communities, that they were able to stop it. And from what I read and from what I also heard is it happened so fast that the project was proposed and then shut down so quickly. The residents never actually found out which company was trying to put the data center there, because obviously there's a few different ones. Musk, like what's happening in Memphis, is just one of them. So it all happened very quickly, and it's still a developing news story. But from what I heard, it was basically just the democratic process. Thank goodness.
Mm.
Here,
Yeah, and it is an issue around this, you know, secretive sort of nature around it. We are unable. Hopkins has been very recalcitrant in terms of talking about who exactly is giving the hundreds of millions of dollars for this center. Um, and so it seems like, as you were talking about with consequences, that these developments, are bring with it a lot of sort of collateral damage to communities, and not just environmentally but also pocketbook wise, potentially around energy costs
Mhm.
as well.
Yeah, I think Barry wanted to say something too.
Mhm. You're muted, Barry.
I just wanted to say that I think we've been fighting it in Baltimore for several years. They
Mhm.
want to cut down many, many trees.
Mhm.
They won't disclose as the donors are the money backing it. But Hopkins, both the university and the hospital, have a tremendous clout here,
Mhm.
and it's been very difficult. But I think the difference with Memphis is this is near very fairly affluent neighborhoods that
Mhm.
will be affected. Not that that should have any bearing at all, but it's sorry. It's also near a very fragile ecosystem that could perish or just be destroyed.
Mhm. Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit more about what is going on in Memphis? What like a little bit of the background around how this development has happened, what the current status is, and potentially what the options are, sort of going forward and the possibilities there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually have more hope for you guys just based on what Barry said, that this has been kind of an ongoing fight for several years. Everything happened so quickly in Memphis. Basically, Elon Musk's AI company called XAI approached city leadership in Memphis back in 2024, and there were some very, very kind of shady backroom deals where a combination of both elected officials and unelected officials struck a deal with Musk to build this facility, and it was incredible how fast it all happened. Basically, they broke ground in 2024. I think they're still kind of tinkering around the edges, but it's basically done now. It took less than a
Mm.
year to build what is said to be the largest supercomputer facility in the world. The intention for the facility, the data center, is to power Grok, which is obviously X, formerly Twitter's AI-powered chatbot. Uh, and that's kind of like what got started with it. And I can get into what I particularly want to talk about is the inputs that go into the facility that are harmful to the community, and also the outputs in terms of pollution. But that's kind of just a quick condensed timeline in terms of how we got to where we are today. Do you want me to go ahead and get into those inputs and outputs?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool. So kind of the big concern with AI facilities is they take a lot of power and water. They take a lot of power to obviously power them, and they take a lot of water to cool these massive, massive supercomputers. Um, I have the data in front of me. The inputs for the Memphis, it's called Colossus, by the way, is the name of the AI facility. And I just can't get over the
Can't make these things up. Just
I know
like,
the this dystopian names for all this stuff is for the tech bros. They think they're so clever, and I just shake my head, you know.
I know, right.
Okay, so the inputs for the facility in Memphis are to the tune of enough electricity to power about 100,000 homes in Memphis. So this is one facility consuming 100,000 homes worth of electricity. And there's been it's been a little bit difficult to get data on the amount of water that it's consuming. I've heard figures in the tens of thousands of gallons per day of water. There was a discussion around trying to connect the facility to Memphis's like water recycling processing plant and whatnot, so that it would be essentially gray water that was cooling the supercomputers. That hasn't happened yet. So it's obviously consuming a lot of resources, also in a fragile community. The outputs are arguably much more concerning, and that's kind of what got me into this story as a freelance journalist who focuses on environmental issues. Um, the Southern Environmental Law Center put some drones up into the sky to determine how many methane powered turbines are powering the facility. They only have a permit for 15, but we were able to show that they actually have 33 methane powered turbines that are running right now. So that's a major civil infraction right there, which is what led to a lawsuit, which I'll get to later. Uh, the result of having 33 methane powered turbines in the facility is that it's contributing to about 30 to 60% of Memphis's total smog, which is formaldehyde and nitrogen oxide. Obviously, this is
Mhm.
causing a lot of cardiovascular issues in the communities, a lot of respiratory issues, and it's planet warming pollutants as well. So the
Yeah, I mean, methane
smog,
is extremely potent. Yeah.
yeah. So the off gassing, the pollutants from the facility is kind of the most concerning thing, because it's literally poisoning the neighborhoods that this facility is located in.
How how is it possible to get this done within a year? I mean, like, legally. You were saying that there's a lawsuit happening around the number of turbine, sort of methane generators that they're using. But how is that just seems unbelievably fast to build something like this.
Yeah, well, it's just kind of proof. It's proof that when people want to actually do something, they can. Like that's kind of
Mhm.
what I think of. I think of like for example, during the pandemic, I watched that time lapse of how quickly China built that hospital in Wuhan. It was like 5 days. They built like one of the largest hospitals in China. It just poof, suddenly it was there. as far as the illegality of the turbines thing, basically, uh, the building was parts of the building were already there. Like there was already some existing infrastructure there, which is what helped make it happen so fast. It wasn't like a blank piece of land that they then just constructed on. So there was some infrastructure already there that they were able to use. And then as far as the permitting goes, I forget the exact term. I think I have it written down here somewhere. Let's see, because it's a very specific type of permitting that they were supposed to get, and they secured the first 15. They were supposed to hold off on the other methane turbines, and they just started using them. So that's why they're being sued right now.
Now, this seems to follow, a pattern that at least around that a lot of these, both tech and the Trump administration, is just sort of change the facts on the ground enough, whether or not you break the rules, that essentially, there's not that you'd have to do so much to unwind it that just becomes very difficult as to undo sort of the illegality of what's already been sort of done here.
Yeah, well, that's very true, and that's kind of what we've learned in the second Trump administration is that there's sort of this realization that the legal process takes a lot of time. We do have a very robust judicial system in the United States, obviously, but it takes a lot of time. So Musk is kind of leveraging this sort of move fast and break things approach. The idea being that if the U.S. doesn't get to the front of the AI arms race, then other big nations like China will beat us to it and kind of have the edge on this technology. So it reminds me a lot of the Cold War of essentially doing a lot of things that we almost certainly shouldn't be doing given the environmental and health consequences of it, but we're doing it because we want to be on top of this new and developing technology. Like I said at the top, there are lawsuits being filed, and there is a really good chance that we're going to get some controls put in on the facility in Memphis. I don't think the facility is going to get shut down. I think that's a bit too optimistic, but we probably will have controls put in on the major source. I just remember what it was called. It's like a major source pollutant. We'll have some controls likely put in as a result of the NAACP and the Southern Environmental Law Center suing XAI and Musk. I don't think the facility is going to get shut down, though, unfortunately.
Is anything being done to help the communities that are dealing with the horrible effects?
Not currently, no. And that's kind of our best hope is that we're able to get enough controls put in on the facility to reduce the amount of pollution. I'm glad you brought up the communities themselves because um, the communities are predominantly poor African American neighborhoods in these historic South and Southwest Memphis communities. These are neighborhoods that have lots of other pollution causing industry around them already. So these are neighborhoods that already have really bad health outcomes as it is. It reminds me a lot of Louisiana's Cancer Alley, where they have 50 times the cancer. I'm like I said before, I'm in Tennessee now, but I'm from Michigan, so I know all about the Flint water crisis and stuff like that. So it's another really good example of that. If the lawsuit is successful, likely controls will be put in on the pollution that will prevent some of that pollution from coming out. But in the meantime, the community members are just suffering incredibly.
A couple of years,
There's a lot of sorry, go there.
someone from the Louisiana Bucket Brigade, we did a podcast with him, and talking about Cancer Alley and the absolutely horrific stories that came out of it. And I'm going to let Jacob come back. Jacob has a PhD in chemistry, so he is even more fraught than I am. But to get back to the water, first of all, water is such a diminishing and vital resource. And now we're coming up with ways like fracking, like AI centers that are using just this disproportional amount of water. We're poisoning water. And what's going to happen when the water is going to things like this instead of people?
Mm-hmm. I'm glad you brought that up because I don't know if this has happened in Memphis, but because I've kind of I started my interest in the whole AI facility with Memphis. That was because it's just down the road, from me. I'm in Nashville, but it's just, the next big city over. There have been a couple communities across the U.S., to pick up on what you just said, where residents are noticing that their water bills are going up astronomically, and also they're having shortages in water too. I can't confirm if that's happened in Memphis yet. I'm not entirely sure, but I have heard other reporting that there's already communities that are feeling the impact of that.
Yeah, I mean, and it's only going to get worse. I mean, I was just looking up. There's now over 1,000 of these centers being constructed across the United States, and that seems like it's going to go up. And we haven't, frankly, kept up. Our infrastructure was, buckling under the, under modernization, and sort of the needs around electricity and water needs with a growing population, uh, even before you add in this new hyper resource intensive, area, all seemingly to fuel some speculative growth, to prop up what otherwise would be a pretty weak economy.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So and
In addition,
so it,
goals is and please, but is anything coming in terms of palliative or just remedial help coming into these communities? It's one thing to say, "Oh, we're gonna try to rein Elon Musk in," but then,
Mhm.
but we're gonna do this to help with the pollution. We're gonna do this to help this. We're gonna offer rebates to help that. Is anything happening from
there've
that?
already been damages, right? There've already been people, just because you stop the future,
Yeah.
it's just because you reduce future pollution doesn't mean that you've undone or made whole anyone from all the damage that was already caused.
Yeah, not that I'm aware of. Justin Fearson is the state representative in the Tennessee General Assembly for those communities. He's been advocating fiercely for more accountability. I'll have to check in with him on that. I haven't heard anything about palliative care or kind of any kind of remediation or anything like that, or any kind of disbursements to the community members. Yeah, Justin Fearson has been trying to fight against the project pretty heavily, and he was the one I was able to quote for the article. But yeah, like I said, it's still a developing story, and it's like it really has that feeling. And I can get more into the class dynamics because I did some more digging on that, but it really has the feeling of it becoming a sacrifice zone.
Jacob, how many trees does Hawkins want to chop down?
Over 100 for this area, and they want to build right on the edge of a creek, the like right abutment right up against the creek, which is a protected, state wildlife, sanctuary zone. So they've assured everyone that, of course, they won't damage the, creek at all. But I do not have high hopes for such a thing, especially since they're already showing that they, are trying to take shortcuts for convenience, in that around 30 of these trees are on public land, which they don't actually have the right to chop down. But they want to cut them down because it would be a more convenient, these trees are all like 60 to 100 years old. It'd be more convenient temporary entrance for their construction site,
Mm-hmm.
if they cut the trees down on the public land.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that says it all in terms of sort of the attitude and the mindset that is going into these sorts of construction projects.
This creek that is very fragile flows into something called the Jones Falls, which flows into the Inner Harbor, which flows into the Chesapeake Bay, which flows into the Atlantic Ocean. So this is a very important water source. And Jacob had a really good idea. Hopkins put how much money in escrow against damages?
You're just saying at least what all the money that has been invested by the city over the past 30 years to remediate and develop the land. I mean, if you're assuring that we're not going to hurt anything, it's not going to harm you to put it in escrow. But I don't have high hopes again for for such a thing. But I do think it would be interesting to try to, you know, find ways to these people are constantly trying to externalize these costs, and figuring out ways to bring them back to them rather than to the communities would be really valuable. and maybe make them think a little differently about these choices.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Wrong, but wasn't Justin Pearson the one of the legislators that was um, thrown out of the legislature for
Yeah,
protest
you.
gun
Mhm.
violence after a school shooting?
Yeah, we had a school shooting at the Covenant School here in Nashville in 2023, and there were three. The Tennessee Three, the infamous Tennessee Three, it was Justin and two of his colleagues were all thrown out for staging a protest on the House floor in the General Assembly, and it was a peaceful protest. It was just them, using their voices to advocate for gun control. Um, and that's kind of the frustrating thing about Tennessee is that we have a Republican supermajority in the state, so it's very difficult to get anything done here. There was a time after that shooting where the governor put forth a special session about potentially doing some gun control because one of his friends was actually killed in the shooting. One of the teachers at the Covenant School was friends with the governor of Tennessee, Governor Bill Lee, and then so he put this thing on the docket, and then just as quickly as he put it on the docket, he and his colleagues took it off that same year. So yeah, Justin Pearson and a couple other House Democrats got kicked out, and then they returned. They were able to come back, basically. So we still have them advocating for gun reform and for environmental stuff like that. So we're at least we have some voices who are trying to make good things happen here.
We Baltimore and Memphis also has in common. Trump has threatened to invade both of our cities with the National Guard.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah, and that's something that we have some. I haven't been reporting on that specifically. We have another reporter at the Tennessee Lookout, which is the outlet that I report for, who's on the ground in Memphis, covering things and talking to local leaders and local officials and whatnot. And my editor, Holly McCall, actually just came out with a piece just recently talking about how crime rates have actually gone down in Memphis. It's still, I mean, she contends that Memphis still has a relatively high crime rate in comparison, just for national averages, but the crime rate has dropped. I think I just read her report the other day. The crime rate in Memphis is the lowest it's been since the Obama presidency. So it's dropped quite a bit, considering the Obama presidency was almost a decade ago. But
Mhm.
I don't think it's any coincidence that President Trump has been picking cities run by with black mayors, because those are the ones he seems to be targeting. Even though there are other cities that have even higher crime rates that don't get a lot of attention for obvious reasons.
We also have a black governor. So we have
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
just one more thing. President, our governor said something Trump didn't like, and he threatened to withhold the funds that were being used to repair the Francis Scott Key Bridge,
Oh, yeah.
which was destroyed and 6 people were killed.
Hmm.
And he's so petty; he wants to withhold funds for a bridge. I mean,
Bridge.
to
What
repair a bridge.
vital infrastructure? Yeah, because there's a bunch of shipping that goes into that bridge, right? And it's
And
also it's a key
A
it's a key
huge
artery
part.
too.
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
keep, but if I may get political for a moment, we
Hmm.
are a blue state, but so pale blue, we look almost white. I mean, we're
Yeah.
very blue. And a lot of times when you have a Democratic majority, you have a key faction that's very conservative that affects overall policy. But we had a Republican governor for 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
And excuse me, he was repeatedly warned that the tankers were getting too big to go under this bridge. He was warned by his own transportation department. He was warned by insurance consultants, and he just went, "Oh well." And a year after he left, we had this tragedy. And but I will say the current governor, who has all sorts of issues around him, he got the money very fast. He started the construction very fast,
Hmm.
and but I put a lot of the blame on the previous administration, who cared more about their donors than the safety of all the people involved in the port.
Yeah, that you couldn't be more accurate about that. And not to get off on a whole other tangent here, but I'm going to be interviewing the author of a New York Times bestselling book about the the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. Speaking of shipping and
Mm.
commerce and whatnot, the Edmund Fitzgerald is it's the 50-year anniversary of this massive ship that sank in Lake Superior in 1975, and it was the last ship that sank in Lake, the last large freighter ship that sank, and I was having some preliminary discussions with the author for the story I'm working on, and he was talking about how they had that exact same mindset, these shipping companies, where they basically have this kind of too big to fail mindset where they're so driven by profits despite lots of warnings that they're getting about these ships are too big or these ships are not meant to be running the lake this late into the season where you have these November storms, et cetera, et cetera. And it's almost like, the capitalist incentives are such that you have to keep pushing until you have a major disaster that makes everybody realize we need regulations for a reason. And that's why the Edmund Fitzgerald was the last large freighter to sink in the Great Lakes, is because at that moment they were like, it was a breaking point for the community. Essentially, we're like, okay, we'll put in regulations now. We won't ship so late into the season. We'll use better technology, et cetera, et cetera. But it's shameful that and I worry about, what is it going to take with these AI centers? What kind of major disaster are we walking into before we're able to get, the elected officials to realize that we need to regulate these things and have safety installs and stuff like that.
Yeah, and especially, I mean, as you were saying, that there's this huge sort of class dynamic as well,
Mhm.
going on in terms of, all of us are definitely being harmed because of this, but as is the case, so much of the story of America, and as well with the climate crisis in general, is that, in the name of some bright progress and future, that some ruling class, has, where they're willing to, sort of ignore the warnings and sacrifice, some level of sacrifice, and some people are worth are able to be sacrificed for that goal. And it's really just the same, sort of different versions of the same story,
It is, yeah, and that was kind of a central theme of my reporting for the Lookout regarding Memphis. Was I did some digging, and I looked at the income level of the communities where this AI facility is going in. I looked at Musk, and I found that the poorest Americans only produce about 10 tons of carbon dioxide emissions per year. And then Elon Musk by himself, with his private jet flights, his rockets, and his boring tunnel making company, is producing more CO2 emissions than the entire populations of all of this, like the several 100,000 people who live in these communities in Memphis that he's now poisoning.
probably.
So it's this central theme of the Americans who have the least contribution to pollution, to emissions, to the climate crisis, are always the ones who suffer the most from it. Meanwhile, the wealthiest people, the top 10% of Americans, produce 40% of all emissions. Top 10% in income produce 40% of all emissions. These people are the ones who are causing the problem to a greater degree, yet they also have the resources to insulate themselves from it. So it's this massive inequity occurring in terms of pollution and whatnot.
And the collaboration with elected officials is,
Yeah.
we had a situation in Baltimore where there's an incinerator in South Baltimore, which is had a poor community, but they got together and they fought and fought because there were so many more diseases, and they were able to prove and demonstrate how awful this was. They went to the city council. They got the city council to eliminate the incinerator. And we had an acting mayor. Our previous mayor had stepped down. We had an acting mayor who ran to be, and he was not elected. He was aggressively not elected. I mean, he got very small percentage, and he renewed the contract for 10 years. So
Oh,
even
wow.
the community had spoken, and the council had spoken, and the science and medicine had spoken. Here's someone in office he wasn't elected to, on his way out, and just
Mm.
extends it for a decade.
Yeah, yeah, and it's always shameful to hear situations like that happening. But I just can't stress enough that community action people just have to keep pushing. I mean, if we're to look to like a brighter note, the St. Charles, Missouri story, the Southern Environmental Law Center and the NAACP is filing a suit going forward with XAI. In terms of the people of South Memphis, and it is a pretty cut and dried suit, and I think it will be successful because they have a constitutional right to clean air and clean water under the Ninth Amendment. It's also a human right as well. So we have these constitutional rights, and we also have the EPA and whatnot. So I think there will be some success, but it's just a matter of the communities continuing to push for it.
You know,
And so what
we like to end on a positive note so our listeners don't self us off the left of the bridge. So let's talk about the Tennessee Lookout.
Yes, yeah. So the Tennessee Lookout is fantastic. It's a part of the state's newsroom network. I've been working with them since 2022, freelancing for them, and it's a very focused, targeted newsroom where our main directive is to focus specifically on state level issues. We're sort of like the watchdog for the legislative and executive sides of the state of Tennessee. So my beat is mostly environmental. I report on a lot of environmental stuff, but it's very independent. It's very no holds barred. If you read my editor puts out a opinion column once a month, and it's pretty incredible what she's willing to say, which is a huge relief because obviously we have all these instances happening just this week and just last week of these corporate media that want to do these mergers that will require permission from the Trump administration, who are willing to back down and essentially fire people because of what they say, or or not report certain stories because they're fearing retribution from the Trump administration. So the Tennessee Lookout isn't like that at all. It's an independent news agency, and because of that, we're able to report the news and kind of hit on these hard hitting issues that are very inconvenient for the people in power.
Yeah, and it's fantastic. It is just so important to have independent media. We were talking about before you came on just how there's been a huge buy up, even recently, consolidation and buy up around a lot of independent and smaller news stations, and just that the controlling of sort of the narrative around what is happening, and the flow of information is really critical for people doing these very damaging and unpopular things, to actually succeed in doing that. So, Ren, we want to thank you so much for joining us today. Fantastic conversation. Really, thank you for all the work that you're doing,
Thank you.
in letting the people know. We'll let people know about the Tennessee Lookout and send links. And we want to thank you so much again. And everyone else, until next time, don't shop on Tuesday.